Hey, All Snow here, and welcome to another episode of Lazy Gamers Review. In this episode, we're going to take a look at Koei Tecmo's latest game released February 17th, Wild Hearts. This game appears to challenge the king of the Monster Hunter genre, Monster Hunter. But before we begin, please like and subscribe, it really does help a lot. Now let's find out if this game has what it takes to hunt with the top dog in the genre. In Wild Hearts, the player assumes the role of a nameless hunter who must embark on quests to hunt down massive monsters known as kimono in the world of Azuma. The main plot of the game revolves around the kimono becoming more aggressive towards the people of the isolated town of Minato due to a scarcity of their food source. As a result, you must embark on a quest that will take you all over the island, from the beaches of Natsukodachi Isle to the frozen ruins of Fusagi Fort, to get to the bottom of it. Before we talk about weapons, I want to mention that this is just the basics of the weapons. For the purposes of this review, I won't be delving too deep into their mechanics. Weapons are a fairly standard affair offering for this type of game, though until a certain event you only have access to the following. The Karakuri Katana, which is a fairly balanced weapon with a simple mechanic. You attack to build up a gauge, then use that gauge to enter a special mode where the sword behaves more like a whip. The Nodachi. This is the great sword of Wild Hearts, but with a twist. While you have your standard slow swings, its special mechanic is Ia mode, where you sheath the weapon and begin charging a meter. You can attack while it's sheathed to charge it much faster, then once the gauge is charged at levels 1 to 3, you release the button for a high damaging attack. The bow. This is another standard offering, but for this game's version you have two stances. One where you hold the bow horizontal and fire Haya arrows that stick in the kimono, and another stance where you hold the bow vertically that fires Atoya arrows, which causes stuck Haya arrows from before to explode. Next we have the bladed Wagasa. This weapon is interesting. It's a bladed umbrella that has a parry system at the core of its mechanic. When you have zero gauge built up, it does basically no damage. As you land hits and parry attacks, you build up a meter, making the weapon deal substantially more damage. It's a hard weapon to master, but it can really lay on the hurt once you do. The Maul. It's a really big hammer. The twist on this weapon though is the extension mechanic for it. After you swing, you have a window to hit a button that extends the handle on the maul and gives you a stage 2 attack that does more damage. You can then extend it again to gain a stage 3 attack, which is where your really big damage is. The weapon is the slowest in the game and honestly my personal favorite of all of them. Those are the 3 default weapons. Once you progress to a certain point in the game, you unlock the remaining 3 weapons, which are the hand cannon. It's exactly what it says it is. It's like they took the cannon off a ship, slapped a handle on it, and handed it to you. This weapon is fairly complex, but can be really fun to use. As you fire normal shots, you build heat and deplete an ammo bar. You're able to deploy a special area called a key base that you use to replenish your ammo, and once the heat gauge is in the red zone but not completely overheated, you can launch a special mortar attack that, if it hits, does good damage and creates a special base that then removes all heat from your gauge. You can then use the base to supercharge your hand cannon and proceed to do your best Death Star blowing up Alderaan impression. The Claw Blade. This weapon is great fun. It's a dagger with a claw attached to it via a long chain. It has quick attacks and allows you to dodge mid-animation of most of your attacks to reposition. As you land attacks, you charge up your claw gauge, which you can then use on a claw attack, which latches it onto a monster and allows you to pretend you're an Apache helicopter. It's probably my second favorite weapon in the game, and definitely one I use if I just want to zone out during a hunt. Lastly, we have the Karakuri Staff. This is easily the most complex weapon in the game. Its default form is a normal staff, but you could also transform it into dual daggers, a war pike, and a giant shuriken. Each of these has its own combo set, and you're rewarded for swapping between the forms during combos to build your gauge. Once the gauge is charged, you can unleash a special attack that transforms the weapon into a giant effing sword that you proceed to ruin a kimono's day with. The combat in Wild Hearts is pretty fast-paced. Monsters are super aggressive, and you need to really make use of your Karakuri to create openings to deal damage. While it bothered me at first with how aggressive they were, I got used to it with time and as I got better at utilizing the Karakuri. That being said, the hyper aggro of the monsters also tends to lead to moments where you'll get hit and have to heal, only to immediately get hit at the end of your heal animation. It doesn't always happen, but it happens enough that it becomes incredibly frustrating, especially in the late and post game where kimono start chunking you for almost all your health in one hit. The designs of the various kimono are great. They have an incredible amount of detail to them and are pretty distinct from one another. I definitely tip my hat to the talented team of artists at Omega Force for their work on them. On the downside, there's not a very large variety of kimono. All of them are, well, mammals. You have 2 different apes that are recolors, 2 different boars that are recolors, 2 rats that have different tails, 2 roosters that are recolors, 2 crows that are recolors, a squirrel that eventually becomes a poison squirrel, 3 hedgehogs that are recolors, an ice wolf, a raccoon, and a phoenix. And then finally, in the tail end of the game, you have a wind lion, a fire peacock, and a dragon. There's no reptiles, bugs, fish, anything of that sort. They really could have expanded their roster better in this aspect. The environments are absolutely stunning. Omega Force really outdid themselves here. Each of the maps is huge, incredibly detailed, and beautiful. I don't really have a lot of complaints or much to say here, so let's just take a look at some of the zones. The story is decent. It's not phenomenal, but it's interesting enough to keep you hooked for the entirety of it. It's pretty predictable at times, but the story in games for this genre generally are. I personally don't play this type of game for the story, so for me, I'd say the story is slightly above average. Alright, there's a lot to talk about here. We'll start with the good. The game is absolutely beautiful. The character models look great, animations are fluid, the skybox is pretty detailed. I love how the maps look, and the weapon designs are absolutely amazing. The game, at least on PS5 where I played it, runs great on both performance mode and graphics-oriented mode at a solid 60 FPS with no issues. Until about Chapter 3 of the game. From there, I experienced horrible frame rates, bugs, graphical glitches, and even progress-halting quest bugs. That being said, a patch that came out right before I started recording fixed most of the issues. The only issues now appear to be occasional random stutters that happen infrequently, as well as Karakuri will still occasionally just randomly blow up while you're trying to build fusions. This is completely random and seems to happen more often in multiplayer and really breaks the flow of the game. There's a few more bugs and glitches to speak of, but these are the main ones that I encountered and have the most issues with. The multiplayer in Wild Hearts is a fairly standard affair for the genre. You can create or join hunts with up to 2 other players to take down Kimono. There's 3 different ways to join other hunters. Through Spirit Gates, which you simply select a monster that's currently being fought by other hunters in your immediate zone. Through the map where you select a hunt and choose to start a lobby or join an existing one. Then from a campfire, you can join goal-oriented sessions or even story playthrough lobbies. Performance and latency in multiplayer varies quite a bit from hunt to hunt. I've had hunts with 0 issues, and I've also had hunts where kimono are skipping around like crazy. This type of game tends to have a pretty high amount of replayability, and Wild Hearts is no different. Unfortunately, the way Omega Force decided to stretch this out is with absolutely abysmal drop rates on materials for the main post-game grind target, layered armor. These drop rates on top of volatile kimono you have to hunt spawning randomly in your zones at any given time make it an incredibly frustrating experience. I personally spent 5 hours trying to grind out materials for a single piece of layered gear, and I still didn't get everything I needed. There's a good way to give replayability to this type of game, and Wild Hearts really missed the mark on it. The lack of variety in kimono coupled with everything else, I just don't see the base game having much staying power. Most of the time while I'm grinding, I find myself just wanting to load up Monster Hunter World and grind stuff there instead. Wild Hearts is a really fun and enjoyable game. The game looks beautiful, and I really enjoyed the art style of the various kimono. The weapon designs were pretty good, and each weapon felt impactful, though some were overly complicated, seemingly for the sake of being complicated. The Karakuri building system was pretty unique, but the game leans on a little too hard to the point of feeling horrible to try and hunt without using them. The monsters were a little too aggressive, giving you basically no windows to deal damage with slower weapons unless you lean hard into the Karakuri. Originally, when I started working on this review, due to all the performance issues, graphical glitches, and bugs, on top of them leaning on the Karakuri gimmick a bit too hard, I was ready to give this game a regretful 6 out of 10. However, since they've released a patch that fixed most of the performance issues and I think the progression bugs which were related to multiplayer, I feel comfortable giving Wild Hearts an 8 out of 10. It still leans a little bit too hard on the Karakuri, and I'm not a huge fan of the hyper aggressiveness of the kimono. The variety of the types of kimono is also a weak point to me, coupled with the flow of the endgame grind. I feel there's room for improvement, but it's not a bad first entry into the genre for Koei Tecmo. Thanks everyone for watching this review of Wild Hearts. Please like and subscribe for more. Now, tell me, what do you think of the game? What's your favorite weapon? Tell me in the comments down below. Now, me personally, I love them all. It's my favorite weapon of the game. There's something about the impact for it. As far as the game goes, I enjoy it, but the Karakuri gimmick and the hyper aggressiveness of the monsters just gets a little bit old for me after a bit. But that's gonna do it for me this time, guys. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.